Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's 10 a.m. I want to welcome everybody to the special meeting of the Reno Sparks Convention Visitors Authority Board of Directors. This is a special meeting of the Board of Directors for April 15th, 2022. I'm going to call to order the meeting. With that, if I could ask Mr. Jimenez, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, sir? To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Jimenez. I do appreciate that this morning. Madam Clerk, can I get a roll call?
Chairman Lucy.
Here.
Mr. Squaga.
Here.
Councilwoman Bybee.
Here.
Mr. Chapman via Zoom.
Here.
Ms. Keel.
Here.
Mr. Murdoch.
Here.
Mayor Sheevy.
Here.
Ms. Faraza. And Ms. Silver.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have a quorum on the board this morning. Just some housekeeping before we get started, please. Everybody, if you haven't silenced your phones already, if you can silence your phones, we'll try to be as expeditious with this special meeting this morning because I know we all have a busy Friday in front of us. With that, we will move, one other thing, obviously, with the microphones, so that those individuals that are attending via Zoom, since Ms. Keel has experienced the nightmare of, please speak into the microphone, and when you're finished speaking, please turn it off, because we can only have 3 microphones running at in any given time. So with that, Madam Clerk, do we have public comment? All public comment. And I'm the one already. I'm the only
Yes,
one
we have one public comment.
breaking my own rule.
Good morning, Commissioner Lucy, Mayor Sheevy, Charles, board members. My name is Kaya Stanley, and I am here representing TEDx Reno. And the entire team and volunteers were about 100 strong, including Ann Silver, who is part of our speaker committee and has served on our executive committee and has been amazingly helpful for us with getting sponsorships and speakers and much. Thank you very much, Ann. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the event. TEDx has been around for a while, but this is the first year that I've been involved with a new organization. So it's still the same great event. And one of the things that you may not know, what we're known for at TEDx Reno is our quality of production. And we attract some of the best speakers in the country because of the quality of our production. And the reason that that's really important is because the videos of our event, once they get uploaded to the YouTube channel, they have over 35 million followers on that channel. And then the Reno videos in particular have had over 90 million hits. And that shows on the video that it's TEDx Reno. Because of that, we're one of the most competitive events for speakers to come, as Ann can tell you, because we've had over 100 applications for speakers, and out of those we picked 20. So it's a really daunting task, but that's significant to know how we've grown like that. With my involvement, though, we're trying to move beyond just the outstanding production to how we can also use the energy of that day to become more involved in the community. So this year, for the first year, we're making it a 3-day event. It starts, the actual event is on May 21st. The day before, we have partnered with the Biggest Little Pass, and we have, it's going to be offered free to every ticket holder. And businesses from Reno, Sparks, Tahoe are going to be able to offer discounts to ticket holders. And by the way, our event is going to be double the size as it was last year. It's going to be about 2,000 people this year because we're at the event center. So it's a way that we're going to really involve the community more with these discounts to the businesses. Then the day of the event, it's the same. I'm sure you've all seen TED Talks. It's 20 very amazingly curated talks, about 12 minutes or less. And then what we're doing different for lunch this year is cool too, though. We got Steve Schroeder that does Food Truck Fridays. We're doing food trucks for lunch, so that's going to be really fun. Then we do an after party. The other thing that's really cool is the day after, we're working on putting together a roundtable with Mayor Sheevy, thank you, and President Sandoval, and we've been talking about doing it with RSCVA also. The goal of that roundtable, and again, will be for the ticket holders, will be to talk about the interconnection between the university and the city and tourism in the whole area and economic development. And so the reason for that is because we want TEDx, we create so much energy that day, we want that energy to live on throughout the year and to really be part of the community. So that's a new change this year. So I'm looking at my notes to see if I got everything. I think I did. And so the last thing is, even though it's a new organization, RSCVA has been a partner of TEDx for many years at the title sponsor level. And we missed the application process. I apologize, I'm new to the role, but I really would ask that a motion be made today to support us at the title level sponsorship again. This is the last piece of the sponsorship that I'm holding out for because we were hoping for it, and then I can get focused on the roundtable and getting the day of event. So that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Stanley.
Thank you, yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Hi, my name is Frances Wiener. I moved to Reno about 7 years ago, and I came out for a job. Job didn't work out, so I was quickly exploring what other options Reno had to offer me. I went and I audited a class at the MBA program. That was Brett Simmons' class, and I was enrolled in the program within 3 months. My first Reno event that I attended was TEDx. And I immediately felt this connection to Reno, not necessarily over ribs, balloons, or beer, which not saying those events are not great events in Reno, but I felt connected to Reno over ideas and really being able to connect with small business owners and innovation. This event has been not only a catalyst for connection for me, but to many other Renoites I know in this area. And here I am 7 years later, advocating as the treasurer, and let me tell you, as the treasurer, I can tell you we need the funds to not only help make this transition from UNR to Reno, that will help connect more Reno folks to these big ideas, but to help Reno's next growth phase as we become a more innovative, smart, and business-oriented city. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, can you fill out a comment card, please? Thank you. Any further public comment from anybody in the audience? All right, seeing none, we will close public comment and bring it back to the board. We are on to item C. This is the approval of the agenda for the April 15th special meeting of the Board of Directors. There are no amendments that need to be made this morning by myself. Unfortunately, we are not stylized today under our Special Events Funding Committee to make a motion on any specific special event and fund that special event, unfortunately. However, we will have the discussion about special events and anything that's going to come back. We will potentially bring that back. We will be bringing that back in the May meeting for consideration. And in that May meeting will probably end up being sooner in the month due to budgets, because our budgets are due to the state sooner than our meeting usually falls. So with that being said, can I get looking for a motion to approve the agenda as posted today?
Mr. Chair, I move to accept the agenda as posted.
All right, I have a motion from Councilwoman
I'll
Bubby.
second that motion.
Second. Okay, a second under discussion. Mayor Sheevy?
I just want to clarify that. It sounds like TEDx is coming for sponsorship, but it sounds like the date is when?
May 21st.
So
correct.
if we were going to bring it back to this body, when would you do that?
I think we can probably bring that back.
Because
I don't have a
that
count.
would be cutting it close.
It will be cutting it close. I know that they have submitted their application, and it is in the queue with the special events funding. Let me pull my calendar really quick here. The May meeting is, 19th? Yep, it's currently May 19th, so it would be right before the event. Be cutting it right, very, very close, but that is currently, unfortunately, due to the process, what we have in the line. Yes, go ahead.
So just
update that the folks at TEDx Reno did submit an application this week. The subcommittee is going to be meeting next Wednesday, April 20th, to consider funding for next year and any special funding within that amount that we have. So we have that application, and we will be addressing that internally next Wednesday with our RSCVA staff.
Okay, but you said next year. Aren't we talking about
So,
this year?
so we do have $66,000 in the current budget that we left for opportunity funds, and if TEDx Reno qualifies, we could make that decision at the next subcommittee meeting next week. The purpose of the subcommittee meeting in general is to discuss funding for the 22-23 year, but we do have the opportunity to fund within the calendar year next week, and that proposal was submitted, and we will go through. So if it qualifies, you know, we might have that answer as early as next week.
Just to clarify, it's the special event panel, not necessarily the official, the board subcommittee that might be on the agenda today.
Correct.
This is the special event panel that we have the additional monies that Charles just alluded to for this fiscal year. And so we can go to that panel for possible approval for that for this fiscal year. And we're planning to meet next Wednesday to discuss TEDx.
Okay.
So that
Is
Go
the
ahead.
panel, you guys? Is it?
the panel is constructed in-house. That's by
That's what I want, good, that's
And
good,
so
staff.
what we're discussing today on the agenda, under item E2, would be the reconfiguration of the Special Events Committee for future funding. But the $66,000 that's already allocated will be going through the normal process as it's currently drafted in the bylaws, under the guidance of Ms. Ernie and her staff to qualify any future of special event funding. So that will come out of that.
I guess I was just confused because the last meeting we did talk about the sponsoring the TEDx.
We did,
event.
and we were waiting for their application, and we did not make the deadline for the posting of this agenda.
Okay, I got it.
So, but we will get that in front of the special event, and like I said, it still has lots of potential to make it through.
Anne, you look like you're kind of perplexed. Do you want to say
Oh,
something?
no,
okay.
I'm going to say something else about
okay.
a different topic.
Oh,
but
okay.
I'm not perplexed at all about
Oh,
this.
okay, 'cause I thought maybe you were jumping in.
No.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Shivi. I'm sorry, I was going to go to Mr. Chapman. He had raised his hand. Mr. Chapman?
Yeah, thank you. And I know we're on a different item here, but just a question for Mr. Harris on the $65,000 of additional dollars that are out there. Has there been any outreach to the community, like in a second round of application, or is that on a kind of a first come, first serve? Is it if you know about it, you can apply for it? Because there probably is certainly some. There are a lot of needs in this realm, and if it's on kind of a first come, first serve kind of a process, I'm just wondering how that works. Again, I guess it's more of a question of the process of how we deal with these one-off applications that roll in.
Before you answer. So, Mr. Chapman, before we get too far, this is, obviously this is going to be a discussion that we're going to have later in the agenda. I'd like to do that so we don't violate, but I think those are good questions. I'd like to take those questions up under E2 if you don't mind, and have that discussion under E2. This is just the approval of the agenda for today's agenda as stated. Ms. Silver?
Mr. Chair, may I just make a comment regarding the minutes from the last meeting? And I'm sorry I didn't do that a few minutes ago.
We'll do that. We'll do that in the next item under
Okay.
D.
Thanks.
Okay? So we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve today's agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with all members voting. Now we are on to item D. This is the approval of the minutes for the March 24th, 2022 regular meeting. Board of Directors, Ms. Silver, I will turn it back over to you.
I apologize for jumping ahead. Just a quick clarification. A question came up during our last meeting as to whether the Reno Sparks Chamber of Commerce had paid for its participation in Bandwango, and I want to confirm that we were billed for $1,500 and paid that amount. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and those amendments will be made to the minutes and reissued and for ratification. But looking for a motion to accept the minutes as posted with the amendments Ms. Silver has offered this morning. I have a motion from Mayor Shivi. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Ms. Silver. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, we're into the meat of our meeting this morning. These are our board matters. So first and foremost, we're going to jump into item E1. This is the review and discussion and possible action regarding the new food service provider. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Harris for his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give a general, very quick overview of where we are in the process. We contracted, or we didn't contract, we went to an RFP for a new food service provider earlier this year. Compliments to Mr. Larraguetta for owning that and running with that. The last time we went through this process, we had one vendor that had been in that process. When we went through it this time, we had 3 national providers, all great providers. And as you can see in front of me, we've got, like I said, about 600 pages worth of RFPs that we have received. We've gone through with that. As a result of the RFP closure, we met internally as a team. We had, I believe, 7 people on the team internally that met through our consultant, Chris Bigelow, who provided us with a matrix to evaluate the 3 different proposals that came through. The team independently evaluated those proposals, went through. We came up with a majority that were in favor of one of the 3 proposals. We then turned that over to Mr. Bigelow, who also independently went through his own evaluation and came up with the same recommendation. With that, we have Chris Bigelow, who has flown in for this meeting. He's at our podium, and he's going to run us through his presentation, move forward and make those recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Let's see if I do need help here.
Welcome, Mr. Bigelow.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. Different clicker for the... Okay. Thank you again. My name's Chris Bigelow, and I just have a few slides to go through which kind of recaps the process and the results, and then certainly available for any questions and answers afterwards that we can discuss about that process. Again, as you just heard, we went out to bid January 31st. It was advertised locally and also issued the RFP to 19 different caterers. And I mentioned, because I know there was an interest, 9 of them were local and 10 of them were national in scope, these caterers. We had a mandatory pre-bid meeting on February 16th, and we had 6 of those caterers in attendance at that meeting. And that was to discuss the RFP, to explain the RFP, and also to give them a tour of all the facilities so they could see the equipment and the spaces they'd be working with. March 17th, 3 proposals were received, which came here to the authority. They were opened, distributed to the evaluation committee, and then also 1 copy of each was sent to me in my office. And again, this is pretty typical. While I help evaluate the proposals and give my concepts and my review, I'm not a voting member of the evaluation committee. So it's up to the evaluation committee to make that decision. We had a conference call on March 28th with the evaluation committee and myself to compare our independent findings, because we hadn't talked prior to that as to what we had read and saw and all that. And I would say, fortunately enough, both the evaluation committee and myself had the exact same results. And that doesn't always happen, believe me. But in this case, it did. And we both the committee and myself, we ranked Aramark as the most responsive, and Sodexo Live coming in as a very close but second responsive bidder. Just to give you a little the reasons of why the group and some of the criteria that we looked at, experience. Sodexo has 28 major convention centers in major markets. Aramark has 12. They both have similar accounts as far as livestock, rodeo, that type of thing. For example, Aramark handles the rodeo in Houston, Texas, and they each have different accounts that would have those similar types of events. And certainly they all have arenas that would be similar to the event center. The National Bowling Stadium, not so much. I mean, that's something unique that they can't say, oh, well, we do this somewhere else. So that part kept everybody basically equal. Local presence, because I know that's of interest. Sodexo is the caterer for athletics at the University of Nevada here in town. Aramark, their regional office and support group is based in Las Vegas. Some of the things that, again, are very important to the quality of food and beverage is always the management team that you're going to deal with. I mean, they can make it or break it regardless of who the company is. And Aramark's proposal, and we'll see a little more detail in the next slide, that was kind of a unanimous choice, that they came to the table with suggestions, with recommended people, and had a stronger management team. The next thing, obviously, would be financial, and we'll look, the last slide actually shows you the difference in finances. But again, Aramark's proposal was superior in those areas. This just gives you an idea. We asked for resumes of general managers and other people in the venue. Aramark gave us 3 people to choose from, and I will tell you also, if for some reason none of these 3 met the criteria of the center, they can also, all these companies could bring additional people to the table. But they put who they felt would be the best candidates, and they have catering background and convention center background, which we feel is very important. Sodexo Live offered 2 people as general managers, but unfortunately, neither of them, it did not appear that either of them worked for Sodexo at this point. They both came out of the hotel business, and they did have catering and hotel background, but nothing was mentioned in their resumes about ever dealing with convention center and kind of the unique situation a convention center provides. So again, that moved the needle towards Aramark. In addition, Aramark provided 5 different positions, resumes for 5 other positions. So a catering sales manager, an executive chef, concessions manager, banquet manager, and controller, all people essential to making the operation run well. Sodexo Live, by contrast, only provided 1 other position, and that was for their executive chef. Prices, and again, when we get into the finances, we'll talk about it, but just to show, they all show their projected menu and what they would charge. So there weren't any real wild cards in this. Things were pretty close between them, and because of the nature of your contract, which we'll talk about, which is a profit-sharing agreement, you have a lot of say as to what those prices are going to be. So if you say, listen, we want to sell a $2 bottle of water, they'll sell a $2 bottle of water, because it's really going to come out of your profit split more than they're going to get, recover their costs. So, but again, this shows you that menus, and this is just a small snippet of the pages of menus they provided, were comparable. One other thing that Aramark provided, which Sodexo, and this is not something we even asked for, but they did offer an in-kind sponsorship for a VIP FAM event. As they know, the key in convention centers is booking business, and that they wanted to show their support corporately that would not affect the profit and loss statement of the center. So they offered that for a VIP FAM event, which you all would pick what that event's going to be. The contract itself, and this is true for both, this is what they were bidding on in the RFP. It's a 7-year term with options to renew, and they're mutual, so if either party wants to get out, they can get out after the 7 years. And it's a management fee, so that the companies earn a percentage of sales, or it may be against a minimum, and we'll see those numbers in a second. But they get a management fee to operate, and then all of the operating costs, so food costs, payroll costs, repairs, maintenance, all of that gets into a profit and loss statement that they will present to you monthly, and then there's a share of those profits between the authority and the caterer. 2% accrual fund, this is something that we've required, so that will be a line item cost for marketing, repairs, maintenance, replacements, and improvements. So they continue to keep up the facilities. And you all may already know this, but all the existing equipment that's here stays. It's your property, so they take that over, and then they're going to add to that with an investment, which at the end of this next contract, that would all stay here as well. So again, repairing, some of the equipment could be 20 years old that they're going to be dealing with, so repair and maintenance is always important. And here's the capital investment. So Aramark has proposed a $1.7 million investment. This is their money they put in at the beginning of the contract, and they'll work with you. Now, they've said, this is how we think you should spend it. And some of this, in both cases, include pre-opening costs, because they're going to have to get their management up here and get up and running. But the dollar amount is what's important. So you have $1.7 million, you're going to work with your caterer as to what's going to be needed. And then Sodexo had a $2.1 million investment that they would put into the facilities. So what we do is we take their pro forma, we ask all the bidders to give us a pro forma of what they see that P&L being, and we average it, because none of them are going to guarantee what your sales are, because you're not going to guarantee what events are here, so they would have no way to guarantee anything. But best guess based on their expertise of what they're going to produce. So we take that pro forma and then we average it. So then we insert the individual company's financial offer to the exact same set of numbers. So they're bidding apples to apples. Same sales, same profit level. And then work into the investment. How much money are they going to put into it? Because, you know, if they didn't put money in and you needed $1 million, why, that would have to come out of your pocket. So in this case, you don't have to, you will not be out of pocket for anything. And then we go over the 7 years for cash flow to come up with a net present value of the deal. And in this case, Aramark's came out at 7.9, almost $8 million over the life of the contract, value to the authority. Sodexo was at 7.2. And the fees, just so you see the difference, with Aramark, they're going to work for a 1.5% of the gross fee or $40,000, whichever is greater. So it should be the 1.5% fee. Sodexo offered 5%. So right away you can see a difference between what each company is working for. Then you go to the profit split. With Aramark, profits would be split 7% to Aramark, 93% to the authority. With Sodexo, because they had this higher fee, they said the first $800,000 of profits, you will keep 100% of it. And then after that, Sodexo wants 20% of it. So those numbers are all factored into this net present value. And that, I guess that really does end it. I mean, that is a quick run-through of the process and how we came up with a selection. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I think I have to turn this thing off now to get the, there's a Zoom button.
Mr. Bigelow.
Yes.
Thank you. I do have some questions in regards to, and there's some conflicting statements between the staff report and what I'm reading in your letter. And our recommendations, you're recommending Aramark has corporate experiencing existing employee base and regional management in nearby Las Vegas Convention Center. However, under yours, it shows that Sodexo is currently operating in the Las Vegas Convention Center. So there is conflicting there. So who operates Las Vegas Convention Center?
Sodexo. Aramark had it for 30-some years, I would say.
So Sodexo, though, is currently...
Sodexo took it over about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago.
So they're currently running the Las Vegas Convention Center?
That's correct.
All right. So so the information in the staff report is incorrect in the sense that they have, but they just are not currently running the Las
Right.
Vegas Convention. They've had experience there, just not running
Right.
it currently. All right. Any other questions from the board? Ms. Keel?
Was this their first, were these the first proposals from them? Have we negotiated with them to?
No, this was the first. So now, once you select the company, we'd sit down, negotiate to come up with an operating agreement based on the RFP and what they offered. So, I mean, there hasn't been, you're talking about like rounds of negotiation? We have not
Yeah,
done
I
that.
mean, I'm just, if they already know they're selected, then we've lost all of our leverage. I didn't know if there was did they put their first proposals in and then, kind of say, well, this company is asking for this, so we need more capital up front, or this, or, to get to this point, or this was just the best two proposals and we're gonna.
Yeah, and this is typical, most public facilities don't get into a negotiating, I mean, we do that with private, like when we do for sports teams or something like that. We'll go back and forth, but with a public entity, normally it's, you put your best foot forward and contract it. Now, that's not to say that if we sat down and negotiated with Aramark and they said, oh, by the way, now, Sodexo did list a lot of things that they had to have in their contract. Aramark said, we're comfortable with the RFP, there are some insurance language and some other things that we normally ask for. So, I mean, there is a possibility that negotiations could break down, but then you would go to Sodexo and say, okay, do you want the account? And, I mean,
I'm used to doing it differently, so if this is different than
Yeah.
the public sector, okay.
yeah, this is very typical of a public sector.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can weigh in on that too. I mean, with our process, that's what we have to do. So we put out the RFPs, we get the responses back, the board selects them, and then we approach them to sort of negotiate the deal points. It's just sort of the system we're stuck with.
Technically, your leverage is basically.
Microphone, Rick.
So basically, your leverage is if you don't, when you get into negotiation in the final, then your leverage is, you can change some things there, or they could possibly change things that we don't agree to. We can go to the secondary, correct? That's exactly what he said.
Right.
If we can't negotiate a final agreement with Aramark that we're happy with, then we can move on. That's right.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Mayor Sheeby and then Mr. Squaga.
Oh, sure. Just really quickly, do any of these contracts require us to have a certain number of events in these facilities?
No. Well, this contract is not. It's very rare that that happens. Now, in the Sodexo contract and our proposal, they did require certain bowling events for all 7 years, which right now are not under contract. I mean, I think the feeling was we're going to have those events anyway, but that was one of their caveats. Aramark did not have that. So it's not.
I worry about that, quite honestly, because we need to get going with some of these events, and just, I would imagine they don't want to take on a contract where we're not living up to the amount of events that we should be bringing in.
Correct. But real, now I'll give you the bad news, is obviously if the events aren't there, sales aren't there, and profits aren't there, that's coming out of your, if you get 93% of the profits, you get 93% of the loss too. So that's their cushion, is they're going to get their management fee at least, but they still have, they've put in their $2 million up front. So I mean,
Their real incentive is for us to continue to have lots and lots and lots of events.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, because they are not out booking the building, they're booking catering events, but typically once they come to the building.
Charles is smirking.
Yes.
All right, thank
The
you.
pressure is on you to book it.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Sheeby. Mr. Squaga.
Thank you. Actually, this is really kind of ties in with the mayor's line of questioning, but just to clarify though, both parties were looking at the same projection historical data, correct?
Correct. The RFP had historical sales, historical events, and also a projection of events coming up.
No, I honestly, I think, I appreciate, if I were negative on anything, it was probably, I think our timeline was really tight coming out of this. That being said, I really appreciate the packet. I think it was well done from staff and Mr. Bigelow. One thing that flagged that I found interesting, and I know that they're not even one of the three or the two finalists, but when you get into staff gratuities and the kind of revenue share there for, one actually didn't even have it. I think the whole gratuity was gonna go to the company.
Correct.
I don't know how you even hire in this market. They're obviously not familiar with our labor shortage.
But when the companies do that, because that's a fairly common, now, and I agree that with the current market, they're going to change, but they may pay a banquet server $18 or $22 an hour. So it's not like you're hiring a wait person for a restaurant at minimum wage. So, I mean, that's how they balance it.
I get it. How does that break out for the two? I don't know if you have it in front of you. How does Aramark plan on doing the gratuity split versus Sodexo? Is it pretty comparable?
Honestly, I don't remember.
Or did they
but let
not?
me-
It's not that big item. I was
Yeah.
just curious.
But again, because of the profit split, you have control. At the end of the day, if you say, we have to do something different to attract the employees, you could say, we're going to need to pay them. You know, in some contracts, they have a union, and the union contract will tell them exactly how they split out that gratuity. You know, that's not the case here, but you would have input as to what you want. I mean, because they certainly do not want to be short-staffed. And all these food companies are using there are special catering temp agencies because, I mean, obviously it's an issue that isn't going to go away soon. But so you'll have input into that.
So, Mr. Squaga, I could chime in on that too. Mike Larragetta for the record. So, we had the discussion internally. We realized that in order for us to be competitive with the on-call staff in the market, based on the market conditions, that we have to have a discussion internally about possibly funding that gratuity pool. Otherwise, anytime there's going to be an event that is happening at the Peppermill or GSR, and it happens to be concurrent with something that's happening in our facilities, we'll have a very difficult time getting staff or quality staff to work that event.
Yes, Charlene.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bigelow, I'd like to thank you, first of all, for your presentation now, for the evaluation, for staff's hard work, for the committee evaluating the contracts. I literally read through all of them and actually was hungry at the end because of the food presentations. And the presentations were really impressive, you know, and I'm visual, so really just all of the graphics, all of how they presented was really spectacular, and really never having read through an RFP for catering before, since we don't do that at the city. It was really great information. I appreciate and really support the Aramark. Makes sense to me. The net profit value makes sense. Both companies were going to make an investment, a capital investment. The third one was not. They told us we had $800,000 we needed of improvements, but they weren't going to give us money to do that. So I think that really gives them some skin in the game to recognize, and we recognize our properties, our equipment, everything needs upgrades, absolutely. And I think the quality that Aramark seems to bring is going to really up the game for the events that we have. I also appreciated the fact that both Aramark and Sodexo really talked about local caterers and local food and drink and things that, and I know Ms. Silver is always talking about that this is not a local catering company that's going to be awarded this contract, but the fact that they're working with all of our local vendors and our caterers and our products here to really showcase the Reno Sparks Tahoe area is important, I think, to all of us. And I just, great information, great work by everyone, and I totally support the decision that the committee has made and the recommendation that you've made, Mr. Bigelow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Murdoch.
Mr. Bigelow, 7 years is common practice in this arena?
7 to 10.
So
7 to 10, and that, it really affects the investment. If you said, well, we only want to do a 3-year, well, then you're going to get a couple $100,000.
Got it. Yeah, that's what
So
I
it's,
figured. Thank you.
Because they need the time to write off the investment. But yes.
Mr. Harris.
Mr. Murdoch, and also the proposal was 7 years with 3 one-year agreements. So on that mutual side, we do get to 10, but it's 3 one-year mutuals.
Correct.
Question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Keel.
Thank you, everyone, for all your hard work with this. One question, was there any major differences between Aramark and Sodexo on food sourcing and distributors and vendors and requirements for who they have? I mean, that's foods off, and food costs is obviously a
Right.
very big deal right now.
All of these companies, you're dealing with two
Major.
billion-dollar
Yeah, for sure.
companies that have sales all over the world. They will have certain suppliers that they would like to use.
But it's not mandated.
No, it's not mandated. And again, because of the nature of your contract, you can say, we don't want you to use Cisco or US Foods. I mean, just for your general groceries, there's a local company. The only thing that they will always ask, and this is true of any of these companies, if you want us to use someone that's more expensive than they'll show you what their cost is and say, okay, you want us to use this local produce.
Oh, I was thinking the other way, but good point.
It's-
For local, we might pay a
Yeah,
little bit more for local.
the local is not going to be cheaper.
But it's not uncommon, though, for even large companies, if they have their distributor and their person that they use, and they're locked in a contract with that person
Oh.
for meat or whatever, and
Yeah.
you can only use them.
No.
Then you're stuck.
Yeah, because it's not a great term, but they're contract feeders. So they go into everybody else's account and cater it. They have to listen to what their client tells them. It's the same way if you get a sponsorship. In the sports world, that's huge. So if they may use Hebrew National hot dogs in a lot of accounts, but you have Ballpark Franks for your official hot dog, they'll sell Ballpark Franks. So they're going to do, same way if you got a deal with Starbucks in a convention center, I mean, they're used to all those types of agreements that they'll work with you, and they will help you negotiate the deal because they know what the other sponsorships are out there.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Bigelow, I have a couple questions in regards to page 1 of your financial proposals overview. I'm a little bit confused in regards to Sodexo Live 1 and Sodexo Live 2. In the profit split to RSCVA, that for Aramark it's 93%, Sodexo Live 1 is 80%, and then Sodexo Live 2 is 100% up to $800,000. Can you break the Sodexo Live 1 and Sodexo Live 2 down for me, please?
Yeah, and if you look, I don't know if you got the page that has the calculation of net present value. We show that, we evaluated both of Sodexo's proposals to see which one would be better for you. And the Sodexo Live 1 that actually had the 3% fee, but 80% split from the beginning, produced less money for you than any of the other proposals we got.
Right.
So, that's why. Now, on the other hand, if your profits never exceeded $800,000, depending on what the sales level is, you could test this for different sales level. But we use an average, I think, of about $4.5 million in sales was the average of all the proposers. So that's why we ran them both, and it was the second option they proposed that made more sense for you.
So Sodexo Live 2 is the more
Was more lucrative to you
advantageous
than the other
for us.
one.
Understood, but the capital investments were higher, correct? On the Sodexo
Yeah,
Live 2.
their capital investment that Sodexo was going to provide was the same under either scenario.
It was, okay.
Yeah.
So with that being said, in my opinion, and this is after reviewing the Sodexo and Aramark, I do believe both of them are very qualified to move into the market. And I understand that Aramark's ability to provide us a higher revenue based upon sales is more beneficial to RSCVA as a whole from a revenue standpoint. However, from an operation standpoint, when you look at their current regional accounts with Sodexo, they are currently operating with the University of Nevada, Reno, and operating in both our football and all of our arenas, and actually all food services for the entire campus. And
I don't know that they do campus dining.
they don't do campus dining,
I think
their sports.
Because we worked with the university, it was just with the athletic department.
Just the athletic,
Yeah.
okay. And then from that standpoint, when we talk about individuals quickly being able to stand up the service in such a short time frame, as Mr. Squaga pointed out, I have a little bit more comfort on somebody who knows the regional market currently. Than I know Aramark has a very well they're going to utilize local vendors. However, from a management standpoint, I think management also knowing the community and knowing what we're the type of consumer that they're utilizing, because the type of consumer that's going to be going through our sports venues is going to be very similar to those that are going through our convention venues. The bowling stadium, RSCC, and also our event center downtown. And they have a strong understanding, obviously, by running Las Vegas for the last 3 years. And their other proximity convention center would be Sacramento and Cal Palace. Both of those, to me, realistically, yes, the offsets of the capital revenue return, the revenue return of sales is more beneficial with Aramark, but to lose a little bit of revenue based upon maybe more efficient sale or efficient operations here based upon the current understanding of the area might be beneficial, and the utilization of individuals from the southern part of the state and somebody just over the hill. So does that change? Does that change the dynamics of the management? Does it change anything because they know they're more locally, in the West Coast than any of the vendors? Because realistically, outside of Anaheim and Phoenix, there isn't anything very similar that Aramark works with here.
Tacoma
locally.
would be
The
similar,
closer.
yeah.
Okay.
No, the answer is no. But what's interesting, and to be quite honest, I've read other proposals since then, so but I don't believe Sodexo ever mentioned having the university in there helping out. The problem with that is, in these large companies, and this is true of Aramark and everybody else, those divisions don't work together. They'll tell you they do, that they're one seamless company and they're all, the Sodexo flag or the Aramark flag. But school dining and campus dining, separate regional managers, none of their regional people would oversee this account. Okay. Totally separate group. So
there would be no crossover.
There'd be very little. Okay. And the problem is, somebody always gets shortchanged. Now, on a special event, if you need help, that's nice. But if on a regular basis, if it's a football Saturday and you have a big event here, which account are they going to take care of first? Right. So it's difficult to, unless it was the same management team and they were running everything, reporting to the same client, then it can work out. But it is difficult to get the different divisions to work together.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Murdoch.
So you said that one of them wanted the guarantee for the bowlers to
Yeah.
be signed.
Yeah.
The other one didn't want any guarantee.
No, they just said we'll sit down and talk. But my experience with that is it's more of the insurance issues that they get hung up on, and some other of the legal stuff. But no, they didn't. Aramark did not talk anything about the events.
So the events don't. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Larragetta, can you answer me one question in regards to historically what Sabre has done in sales prior to the pandemic, when we had some of our larger events in the community?
So I don't, Mr. Chair, Mike Larragetta for the record, I don't have that data with me today. I would be guessing. I can tell you what we are as we go into the budget process moving forward, what we have put in our forecasted numbers, obviously to be presented to the board for approval on May 19th. And to reiterate Mr. Bigelow's earlier comment that he was working off a revenue number around 4.3 or 4.6 million. And the number that we're working on right now is slightly above that, but right within that range. So my guess is that Sabre pre-pandemic was probably in that $4 to $5 million range. I'd have to go back to Courtney. Courtney might know, Ms. Jager might know, or Renee McGinnis might have an idea. I'm not sure. Jennifer Jones. About right? Yeah.
So 4.5 million is historically what we've done in previous years?
Correct. In 2019, the facilities generated 7.9 million in total revenues. However, within that revenue number, you had significant anchors. You had Safari Club, you had Interbike, you had the pavilion at the Livestock Event Center, which no longer exists. You also had 19 concerts. So in this initial run, this budget that we'll present in May, currently there are 2 concerts on the books. That revenue alone in 2017 or 2019 represented about $800,000 in revenue to the authority.
Okay.
And if I could just, one other point, if I may, Mr. Chair, your comment with regards to Sodexo having the contract for the University of Nevada, we definitely looked at that, and we anticipated that Sodexo would make an effort to use that as an advantage, as an asset, in terms of having local staff available should we have concurrent events or we have an event where we don't have enough staff within the facility to support that event, and that did not come up at all in any discussion with Sodexo.
Okay.
And the other thing, I mean, in the industry, it is not uncommon that, and I'm sure it's happening now, there are employees, I'm sure, that work here, that work at Nevada now for Sodexo. I mean, they may work for 3 or 4 different employers. I mean, the nature of catering is, it's like, it is a gig economy. And so just like they'll go to different hotels, they'll go wherever the money is, that's where they want to be serving. So management, not so much, but certainly hourly employees, you'll be using people from all over the city.
All right. Yes, Mr. Chapman.
Chair.
Mr. Chapman.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to your point about Aramark and their local experience. They do have a footprint up here in Tahoe. They do run it's small for sure, but the Zephyr Cove Resorts. They own the boats that operate on the lake, as well as a ski run marina. And then they also obviously are the concessionaire, the new concessionaire for a couple of years ago at Yosemite. So they do have obviously a footprint within our region, maybe not to the scale that we're talking about on this particular one as it relates to within the kind of the Reno Sparks area. But they do have a presence up here in Lake Tahoe.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Mr. Harris.
Mr. Chair, thank you. A couple of things that I just want to mention, and this is a great discussion. One of the things that I was asking was, who was here before Levy, and how long were they here? And actually, it was Aramark for many years. Both of these companies have done a great job in the presentation, and it was really tough for us as a committee to go through some things. One of the things that the committee decided that was important in terms of our recommendation was not only that financial picture, but it was also in how they approached the staffing for this. And Aramark had identified veteran people within the industry, either within Aramark or in the industry, that would step in. And one of the things I did is I called a few different facilities, and I asked those GMs about the different options. And they told me flat out, that success is driven by the GM and by the executive chef. And so those teams are really important, and it absolutely had an influence for our committee as we came up with that recommendation as well.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item? Ms. Bybee.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, in looking at the two, the difference is pretty substantial to me. It's $800,000 in net present value from Aramark compared to Sodexo. I'm concerned also, looking at Sodexo, that the 2 people they did present didn't even work for Sodexo and had no convention experience. So I think that's like a really important thing to be looking at. The slate of candidates that Aramark was giving us for their, and how critical the management team is going to be, they were just so far above. And I think those things are all important factors that, for me, Aramark absolutely, just because Sodexo's at the university, doesn't necessarily outweigh those other concerns of Fiscal and the team they're presenting and the experience, because their candidates we're not even close in what they're proposing candidates to take that management responsibility for this RFP. Thank you.
I have one last question.
Yes, Ms. Keel.
How many events do we run on average for bowling, and what's the penalty if we don't meet that minimum requirement?
With Aramark, there is no penalty.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said there was.
No, Sodexo.
Sodexo had it.
Sodexo had certain bowling tournaments that you had to have, or they wanted to renegotiate.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Any further discussion on this item? Is there any public comment on this item?
No public comment.
Thank you. All right, seeing no public comment. All right, at this time, there is in the board packet a recommendation from staff. And Mr. Bigelow, I am looking for direction from the board in regards to next steps.
Mr. Chair, I can make a motion.
All right, Ms. Bybee?
I move to award the contract for food service provider under request for proposal 2022-01 to Aramark under the terms presented and set forth in Aramark's formal proposal, and direct the CEO, working with the board chair and legal counsel, to negotiate the final form of agreement, and authorize the CEO to execute the final agreement as approved by the CEO, board chair, and legal counsel.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Murdoch. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with all members voting. All right. What's that? Yes, with all members present. All right. Next, we are on to, this is item E, I'm sorry, let me go back to my agenda. E2, this is a special events funding committee. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Harris.
Thank you. The board in the previous meetings wanted to put an agenda item for special events, and the board of directors is being asked to review, discuss, and take possible action to rename the Special Events Funding Committee to the Marketing and Special Events Funding Committee, and to further identify the objectives of the committee and the items under its purview. Items to which the board of directors may take action to delegate to the committee include but are not limited to review of the current annual application process, criteria used to allocate special event funding, implementation of a process and criteria to be utilized in analyzing requests and special events funding outside an existing annual application process, and the process and criteria to be utilized in considering recruitment of special events to the area.
All right. Ms. Ernie, would you want to add anything to this at this point, please?
I don't have anything to add at this time, Mr. Chair.
All right. All right. Board members, discussion on the Special Events Funding Committee. This is a discussion brought back, obviously, from the last board meeting to discuss the reorganization of special events funding and how we proceed into future years about process and the criteria to allocate funding. There's a significant amount of funding this board has set aside for special events and what that will look like. So realistically, at this time, the motion would be just to move forward with a special events funding committee to evaluate the special events funding and move forward at that point. Is there any discussion on those topics? Ms. Bybee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question, either Ms. Ernie or Mr. Harris. So the adding marketing to the title of this committee, how does that expand what our purview may be, or what was the thought behind why we added marketing to that?
I believe the thought behind it was we used to have a marketing committee here with the board, and it hasn't been active for a few years. And I think this was, since special event funding falls under the marketing department budgetarily, that I think that it was just meant to combine those two since it's all under that one section.
Okay, so really the funding, though, we're still looking at is funding for special events.
Correct.
Which fall under marketing, which is you.
Correct.
Okay, I was just, and then I didn't know, as we look at the criteria, which I think is important for us to review, I think what we've got right now has worked, but I think we're finding, some bumps in the road of things that revisiting what those criteria are. I think this is a really a good time to be doing that, because we're maybe too locked in, or we found through the years that, and obviously this board is committed to that. We've doubled the amount of money we want to budget for it, and kind of expanding that scope and how we go about criteria. I do like the fact also of looking at the one-time application in a year, but the ability to set aside, like we have set aside, and determine what that amount is for things that come up midterm, mid-year. I think that's important to give us some flexibility. And so, thank you, that answers my question on the marketing side.
Thank you. Any further questions? Mr. Murdoch?
Interestingly, the way the committee was set up, it seemed like we were just order takers. We were waiting for somebody to present us an idea. I'm hoping that this new marketing committee, led by Charles and team, will recommend new things for us as a region, whether it's the new Hot August Nights or the drone races or something, the new big bike races, the next big fishing and hunting show that we should be sponsoring, and like the old safari, replace safari with our own Western regional hunting show and put it in all our facilities. So anyway, the next new, whatever it may be, event for soccer, anything, but we need somebody in the marketing team that looks at the future and wants to sell it and put a notice out to the rest of the country that we're open for business in Reno, Nevada with special events or ideas, whether it's an NCAA baseball, basketball, anything. Vegas is off the charts doing everything in their facilities. How do we do it as a community and make it work? But I think we need to take a lead. It's just not an order taking, we come up with a plan and we got the money, come get it. We got to tell them we got money, come with an idea. Come with so that's where I really think we got to go here, because the future's now on our next new events, because air races, a lot of these events have a timeline, they climb, and then they, boom. So we've got to, what's the new?
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch.
Yeah.
Mayor Sheeby.
Oh, I just wanted, I think it would be good, like what that process is, because a lot of events come my way, then I send them to you, and then I don't see them. So I don't know really like where they go and what's happening. And I also think we should do a better job of putting it out there that we are open for 4 events. This is why we're here. So I would like a better process of like what that looks like. Because I have to tell you, like honestly, I've kind of felt like it's been up to the board to go out there and get it. And it just, to me, it seems a little confusing of what that means. So I do feel like, because Vegas is saying to me, because I talk a lot to obviously the other entities down there, and they're like, what are you guys doing? I mean, they're on fire. So I think you're right, Mr. Murdoch, in the sense like, what does that look like? And maybe, Charles, if you could come like with 2 or 3 events, that would be really good. 2 or 3, I mean, we did lose Safari Club, we did lose Interbike. I know there's a couple, and the other thing is bowling. Where are we at with those contracts? Have we signed those contracts?
I'm happy to address all.
Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to make a couple comments here. First of all, thank you all for great comments. And I think we do need to look at the process, and that's part of what we need to do. Mr. Murdoch, I don't think we're order takers. In all honesty, this team works really hard to promote the opportunity each and every year for the dollars that we have. Now, the fact is we're getting more dollars allocated to that, which is really important. But Mr. McDonald, Ms. Ernie, and the team do a heck of a job of putting out the opportunity for groups to apply. 34, I believe, is what we had for this coming year that we talked about. For the very first time, we put money aside that we haven't done before. So before this year, it was done once a year, and that was it. And part of that adjustment is the growth of what we're talking about, to be able to set aside money for things that happen in the year. And we've talked about that at almost every board meeting when special events have come up. So the fact is that we have a group or 2 that have applied, we're addressing that, and we're moving forward. When it comes to special events, you saw that our sales team, specifically our sports team, worked for 10 years and got Davis Cup here. So to do new things, that's on our agenda. But you can't really compare us to Las Vegas. $13, $14 million budgets, 20 people working for them. It's a difference in terms of priorities of how they align. Now, if this board says that's really important for us to do, then let's figure out how we go through that process, right?
But they are comparing where we were like in 19, because we were like this in 19, right? And all of them, all those markets are coming back like that. So,
absolutely.
And I do want to commend you guys for doing a tremendous job. You guys absolutely do. So I don't want there to be any, sediment that we don't think that you do. I think you do. And I also think it's hard to do that whenever you are such short-staffed. And that's taken a while to onboard. I mean, that's, that's all over, but at the same time, like, we got to get aggressive. It's interesting. I've seen just even in my businesses how we have taken a different approach to hiring and getting aggressive. And if you take a different approach, I can't believe the difference it makes. I think we've all been like, we typically have had this standard way of the way we recruit and retain, our businesses. And culture, like we're finding out, is like number one. If you don't have a culture, you don't have a company. So, I mean, these are just things we got to think a little bit different. So, but I think that's good. Let's get some clarity of like what that looks like when we get events. And then I guess, I get concerned when you said, and that was like an eye-opener, you said we have 2 concerts coming in and we had 19 before. What's going on? So, I mean, that's why RSCVA exists. This is what we're supposed to be doing, marketing and driving tourism. And that comes with spending money.
No, absolutely. And Mayor, let me just finish kind of where I was going with that. And to your point, obviously we want to bring more events. That's really important to us. The goal setting that we have as an organization that was set up was for this year, obviously what we do is market and sell a destination. That's what we're charged with. That's what we do. And you'll see this in the CEO reports that are coming out later today. That goal is we got to hit that group room night number that is helping every one of our hotels and every one of our attractions. You'll see it today. 85.6% our sales team is to plan this year. So we're meeting that goal because that is absolutely one of our objects. I met with Ms. Ernie also. We're exceeding when it comes to our marketing and all those goals as well. The bottom line is, when we sat down as a team, we said, okay, what are our tenets, right? What's really important for us moving forward? And special events is part of that. So part of that is, how do we continue to grow and develop what we're talking about? And special events is part of what we're doing. Now, that means that we have to adjust our goals and our resources that help support that moving forward. And that's what we're going to do.
But that means we've been doing record numbers, which is awesome, right? Right? So with that being said, I keep hearing this sentiment of that we don't have the resources or funding to do that. So, like, that's got to be a thing, So that's one of the things I want to make sure, because I feel like there's a little bit of this pushback of, sort of the financial side of it. But we're, like, hitting our goals. I don't think that we have had, this has probably been a record year.
It had, and actually, Mayor, and we've mentioned this, in 2021, we had a record 4.2% better than in 19, but here's the challenge with that. The board has approved and directed us for specific programs within that. At the very last board meeting, I spent time, if you look at the tape about an hour and 15 minutes in, that the dollars that we have allocated are for very special projects this year. So $1 million for Conference of Mayors, the augmentation for ASM that wasn't meeting their goal of 795, 815,000 for the transition, early signings.
That's what we're supposed to be doing, Charles.
No, and I'm not.
Seriously.
Absolutely, but what I'm saying is those dollars are allocated.
Thank goodness we have that happening.
Absolutely, but what I want to get to is we don't have additional dollars that we're holding on to either hire people or for other programs. We have spent the dollars that we have within that record, because if you look at the delta between 2019 and 2021, you're talking about $1.3 million of incremental revenue over that, and that's already been allocated by the board. So I just want to be clear that we're doing great, but we don't have additional funding that we're holding on to that we're not spending for any reason. And so when we go into that planning process, we've got to figure out where we want to put those dollars. And to your point, thank goodness we had the records to be able to support that. But moving forward, we've got to figure out how to best allocate those resources for the goals.
Mr. Murdoch.
Also, we're sitting on $4 million, which we've got to allocate that can replace things in your budget. You've got the, we've got those grants. We've got $4 million in grants, so we're really ahead of the curve.
But we're not spending it.
But I'm just, yeah, I agree.
Mr. Murdoch, we're not sitting on the money. We, as Courtney said, even in the last meeting, we have not been allocated those dollars yet because we're waiting on that. Now, that being said, for the May meeting, we have, and I talked to Chairman Lucy here before we got started, we have facilities review. Trent has put together probably millions of dollars that we have to do to improve those systems. And so we will address that at the next meeting in May. But we're allocating the best we can at the direction of the board to be able to reach those goals. That's all I'm trying to say.
So let me try to bring this kind of back into,
Sure.
yes, Mr. Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of thoughts here. You know, event discussions and special event conversations are always very convoluted and complicated. I think part of what we have to discuss is, do we want to be in the event production or do we want to be in the event acquisition? I think we've tried event production before, and the blue jeans and blues, whatever that was, a number of years ago. Event production takes a huge impact on staff. So I think we need to be clear on what we're asking of staff. And for one, I don't think I would support that we want to get into the event production business necessarily. So I think we need to have that discussion. And also we need to be conscious about how the events impact the larger region. I think we have to have a discussion on timing. You know, when do we have the need periods for certain events? You know, do we want to bring a huge event on the 4th of July? Is that the best time to do that type of thing? Or on New Year's Eve, depending on what type of event we're talking about. And we also have to target events for sub-region. An event that might work and that is good for us to be involved in Reno isn't the same kind of event that would be successful up here in Lake Tahoe. So how do we look at all the different regions within the RSCVA sphere and make sure we're being, that there's equity or parity to some extent about how we're doing those different things. I did have one question on this particular item. How many committee members are we looking to fill? And with that, I would also raise my hand for committee consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me bring this back to one more time. So we've heard discussions from all the board members, and clerk, please note that Ms. Safraza did arrive at the meeting at 11:10, and the idea is that we currently have, as Ms. Ernie pointed out, we used to have a marketing committee. Initially, when we were doing a number of the challenges with the strategic plan and the new branding in previous years, we have not needed the marketing committee because that has been fully under the operations of staff, and there was no need for that subcommittee. So that subcommittee was dissolved for a period of time. We currently have just two acting committees, which is a Finance Facilities Committee comprised of Mr. Andy Chapman, Mr. Esquaga, Rick Murdoch, and Councilwoman Bybee. And then there is the RSCVA Executive Legislative Committee, which is comprised of myself, Vice Chair Silver, Mr. Murdoch, and Councilwoman Bybee to discuss issues. The issue today is to bring back the marketing, reinstall the marketing committee and make the special events as a portion of that, because that does fall under Mrs. Ernie's department, and she would head that up with Mr. Harris from the staff side. And to a point, now we have, as in our current bylaws for the board of directors, once a committee is formed and established by the board, it is at the discretion of the chair to fill those 4 board seats. So that is really the discussion today, is a willingness to participate on the marketing and subcommittee once that committee is reestablished, and then under advisement with Mr. Harris and Ms. Ernie to seat 4 members of this board to operate and bring back a new construct of what special events and marketing challenges would be within the community to address the needs that have been vetted here at this board level. So that is the intent of today's agenda item, and I want to make sure that that's very clear with everybody about how we're moving forward. We're not going to make any substantial changes to the special events funding, but the comments and concerns shared today will be brought in front of that committee for consideration before the next round of special events funding goes out, and how, to your point, Mr. Esquaga, when the timeline, to Mr. Chapman, how the events are different from geographical locations from the Lake Tahoe Basin to the Reno Sparks area. Those are the discussions that will happen at the committee level, and then brought back for full ratification at this board level when those changes need to be made to the bylaws. But that is really the intent of this formation. So is there any further comments on the intent of setting up the Special Events and Marketing Committee and reinstalling that as a acting committee?
Mr. Chair?
Vice Chair.
I'm sorry, Charles, did you want? I'm sorry, just a quick comment. I want to highlight what the mayor said. You know, I believe it is the job of the RSCVA staff, and they're doing a great job of filling our facilities. I mean, the very existence of RSCVA is about making sure we have events, whether it's concerts or rodeos or whatever we have, because those engender room nights. I'm just having a little difficulty understanding what the normal process is by way of which RSCVA secures events, programs, concerts, et cetera, versus special events. I'm not sure I fully understand the definition, or the definition we're creating, of what constitutes a special event. Is that outside the norm of our budget? Is that anything that flows your way? Is it something that, I think Mr. Murdoch or someone earlier mentioned, you know, are we going after them, or are they coming to us? I'm just a little confused as to what we mean by special events contrasted with all the events you're charged with bringing in.
I'm sorry. Could I just add, though, while Ann brought that up, would that not be the task of this committee to somewhat clarify that? Because I do think, even when this is set up, we're probably going to have this discussion in another 2 years. And I don't mean that in a bad way. This thing is going to kind of evolve. I think Andy brought up, 20 years ago, we had a special event staff. That's all they did. And I think we realized, very expensive, very hard, you know, is it better to not produce them? Is it better to just help seek them? I would see that this marketing and special event committee would kind of be the one that puts the framework in place. And I think these definitions, I'm with you, Anna. It's kind of like, wait, where again are we as an organization? How do we go about it? I mean, even the concert point, does RCVA have an entertainment buyer? No, right? But you coordinate with, on the other end, GSR's buying a ton of entertainment, the Rose buying a ton of entertainment. You know, how do you coordinate these efforts? I don't see us getting into the entertainment buying. But I do think that group, the one question I had, and this may have been touched on, when you build this marketing special events committee, are we tapping into general public, or is it strictly
No,
staff
this is
and
just
board?
would be staff. This
Okay.
would just be staff and board.
Okay.
And now the current construct is, and Christina, correct me if I'm wrong, is comprised of staff members evaluating applications that come in by the timeline. In my first year on the board, I did sit on it before they changed the subcommittee laws for the open meeting rules. The committees do evaluate and bring forth all of the asks, and then based upon criteria set forth by staff, they rank those, prioritize them, whether they're a legacy, emerging event, or young event, 1 to 2 years old, that would require a little bit more funding now that they're established, but still in their new kind of growth phase. 3 very different categories, and then would allocate a certain amount of dollars specifically on how many legacy events applied, how many growth events applied, and how many new emerging events, and would allocate based upon 1 ask, 2 necessary need and value, and then bring those recommendations. So realistically, could the board participate in the actual selection process as it's currently constructed? No, because that would violate open meeting rules and it would be subject to open meeting law. So, and no member, so the reason we do that is to preserve the anonymity of the request and those looking for money until those requests are kind of vetted. What we're asking is that this committee go back and completely reconstruct that based upon the new environment, the involved environment that we're looking at going forward. And remember, Mr. Esquaga, it would have been Mr. Flynn was participated with me on that. The mayor, myself, Mr. Flynn, and I can't remember who the other board member was at the time, that did sit on the marketing board, and we did evaluate those special event requests as part of the marketing agency or subcommittee, and then brought that to the board. It wasn't really set aside, but now we really want to evolve, like I said, evolve the ask, because there is a significant amount of money that this board has put forth into that special event funding, and which gives us more flexibility to look at different timelines, how we expend that money, what that qualifies, to your point, qualifies as a special event versus an actual concert or purchasing an event. And so those are the discussions I would hope would transpire in very rapid nature at that committee level. Mr. Harris.
Just one quick comment and then a question. So I think that this committee is fantastic. Mr. Murdoch, for that thought of trying to acquire new events, we've talked a lot about that. And if we're going to go through that, then that has to be the priority in terms of that group, to realign what we're doing from a resource standpoint, whether it's people, money, and things like that. Question for you, Mr. Chair, and that is, from a timing standpoint and appointing these folks to the committee, does that potentially affect our meeting next week, which we're talking about funding for next year? No. Or is this completely separate? So I just want to make sure that we're in line with the board with that.
It would not impact the meeting for next week in regards to the Special Events Funding Committee. That would still convene based upon the current sets within the bylaws. There would be no time for this committee to convene and really reconfigure, I don't believe, in a timely fashion, that entire framework. That would take at least a month or two to get that done, but I would hope that that would be accomplished before the fiscal year, at the end of the fiscal year, and before we take over operations of the facilities.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Councilman.
Just another comment, kind of following the conversation. I see really the ability of this committee as we relook, and I went through and looked at what are the criteria right now, and those are things, some of the things, it's not supposed to be primarily an activity for locals, so it's supposed to generate room nights. So when we look at something like TEDx that doesn't generate a lot of room nights, and there are more locals, there's people come in from out of town, but the value of TEDx to this region from a marketing perspective is huge. So right now, under some of these criteria of, using two Washoe County lodging properties as a requirement, generating overnight visitors, it does enhance arts, cultural heritage, but some of the criteria right now, there's events that I think we should and could be really interested in sponsoring to make sure that it's, and maybe adding the marketing to it, kind of gives us that ability, and the committee the ability to relook at some of these aren't going to work anymore, and what is our priority? Not exclusive of only room nights, but the marketing value of something like TEDx just is an example that just jumped out at me of these old, what the criteria is now, that probably might not be where we want to go.
Thank you, Ms. Bybee. Mr. Fraza, I have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree with everything that the board members said. One thing that I think it was board member Esquaga said, and I don't know if you were suggesting this, but just talking, getting some information on just how Vegas does it with Vegas events. I like the idea of having four board members on this committee, but I also think maybe we should look at adding a few more from outside of the board. For example, someone who, we don't have anyone with an arts background on the RSCVA, or someone like with sports. I'm thinking Eric Eidelstein or someone like that. But maybe looking at expanding the 4 members of the board and adding people to this special events committee to vet the applications, I think might be a good idea. Just my 2 cents. And I do agree. I wish we had funded TEDx last month. I'm totally supportive of that event. And Miss America, and I'm sorry I'm late to the conversation. I know those aren't on the agenda today, but I think they're good events to bring to our region. And I think for this special events committee to have it also add to the expertise of our current board members of the board, that arts and culture and that sports tourism, I think is important to add. So I don't know if that's where you were going, Board Member Esquaga, but just some thoughts, and that's how Vegas Events was established. They have members of the LVCVA board, but they also have board members from the public. So I don't know if any other board members have some thoughts on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Fraza. And so to that point, in conference with council, that is an opportunity for this board to consider that, being the nature of the special events and marketing committee, we would want at least 4 board members to sit on this board to make sure that at least a guidance of the board is there as a quorum. We could add, I would recommend no more than 2 or 3 outside community members that would participate in the discussion. That could bring a value add of experience that may or may not influence a change. What I would caution against is adding more non-board members or outside influence than actual board membership. So you could have my recommendation would be having up to 7 members on the board, 3 of those being outside, and then 4 currently sitting board seats. And we could have that conversation today in the construction of the committee as well. Mr. Murdoch.
Mr. Chair,
And Mr. Chair,
hold on, Jess.
What I was going to say is you've got, for instance, our university is up and coming. We've got a friendly university that it's growing, and you might look at a university seat, an arts seat, a seat that, to your point, no more than 7, but you've got all these couple big entities that could help drive special events or opportunities, whether it's Eric Edelstein or Brian Sandoval or whoever it is. I'm just saying I agree with what you're saying, but we do need the big entities that can help us,
And I think that would be a perfect construct of a marketing committee, because remember, not only does the RSCVA responsible for marketing this community, but we're also marketing every organization within this community, whether it's sports, arts, our university. Those all are beneficial from our marketing standpoint. So businesses, everything benefits from the ability to draw individuals to this community. And to Member Bybee's point as well, the current construct we have at this board under Mr. Harris's guidance very, very much shifted our focus to community involvement, which we've heard a number of times, and right now, as it's written, does not allow for community involvement, and kind of alleviates the ability for those types of groups to participate, which may not show necessarily room nights, but has a direct correlation to draw via community involvement and having a better, larger presence within the community as of what RSCVA is, or Reno Tahoe, or whoever we want to identify as, but having that consistent branding not only outside of our community, but within our community as well. Any further comments? Ms. Ernie, I saw you.
No. Yeah, I just want to address some of the questions that were asked before we continue. There are currently 7 staff members who do sit on the committee, including myself and Mr. Harris. We do have members of the sports team who are on that committee under Mike's, under the sales department. And Ms. Silver, to your question, the current guidelines for a special event are what are in the board packet, and all the things that Ms. Bybee kind of discussed. But I think that with this additional funding and with this movement and with our strategic plan and our shift to community involvement, I think that we can retake a look at that and see how we want to do it moving forward. For next week's meeting, just our intentions as of right now is the panel will meet next Wednesday and look at the events who had submitted their applications that were due in January for next fiscal year. And then I think that we will also, to Chairman Lucy's point, take brainstorm some ideas, and then come to the committee, the special event and marketing committee, with some ideas and do some research on what we believe the next step should be moving forward.
Wonderful. Mr. Squaga. Well, I'm going to go Mr. Squaga and then Mr. Murdoch and then Mr. Chapman.
And part of it, I want to kind of build off of, I know Jessica had asked me on my comment with the, tapping into the local community. I think I'm as much talking about, I think what we're all agreeing on is great, almost as much of a more informal, again, not to stay, want to be sensitive of open meeting laws. I know that involves board members, but really tapping into the expertise. I mean, you brought up, Eric at the ballpark and the campus. I think having that offshoot group under Christina to bring in and really, again, Burning Man, right? You look at South Lake Tahoe with Carroll, what they were able to land with the NHL game. It was a one-time shot. That's all right. That was a great exposure. But I think getting that brain trust of, again, are we all rowing in the same direction? Not allocating any tax dollars, nothing like that, but that could even make almost like a working group that could bring the recommendation to you guys and we could crystallize it as a committee. That's where I see the involvement on. But no, I feel good about, again, where we're going with retweaking this. So,
Mr. Murdoch.
Just, we got to remember that what makes our world go round is room tax. I don't want to leave that somewhere else. I want to tell you that for us to afford TEDx or to afford even locals, we have to have visitation and outside events. We have to have better mousetraps to capture room tax. And that's what this authority was set up for. It was meant to capture room tax, and it was meant to spend it refilling the coffers and re-eventing, and whether it's Miss USA or whatever it is, a university basketball tournament, I don't care. But we gotta stay focused on what is our real mission. The locals are important, and we educate them, but we've gotta get visitation to fill. We have 13.5% room tax. We've gotta get people to buy. So it's I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of why we're here.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Murdoch. Mr. Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick comment and a question. A lot of the conversation we're having obviously right now is on special events, and I'm struggling on the marketing component of the naming of this committee. So my question is, will broader marketing subjects be brought forward to this committee for conversation, review, whatever it might be? If it is focused specifically on special events, I would recommend we just call it a special events committee. I don't understand the marketing part of that unless there are going to be elements that are brought to this committee to discuss on the broader marketing side. So maybe you can clarify that, please.
Mr. Chapman, and I can clarify on that. So when the marketing committee was established, that was during the time of our rebranding. And the committee did vet not only very, very similar to what we're doing right now with the food and beverage vendors. We vetted all of the marketing vendors. From BVK to a number of different. So contractually, the marketing committee would, from that standpoint, vet some of those pre-contracts from a board standpoint on mission and vision of the whole board, but not have those types of discussion in a full open meeting of the full board of directors. And the decision when we disbanded it was that, the discussions had already been set. There were long-term contracts for our marketing vendors and our media buys that most of those decisions could be made at the full board level. But going forward with the discussions of potentially changing in future years, changing marketing vendors or rebranding, whatever that may be in future strategic plans, the marketing side of that committee would vet those proposals ahead of the full board. And so, and realistically, both special events and marketing fall under Miss Ernie's department, and so that would be the only reason. So I don't want to utilize the title of the committee to confusing the individuals what the nature of it is, but realistically, it would be very separate in its discussion, in its portion of how that would be vetted. But most of those decisions still would be coming back for a full board vetting and decision. They would be recommendations, more of an advisory prior to with board members. And one thing I also would like to proffer too, outside of adding permanent members to the marketing board, and you bring up a very good point. If you were to bring in outside individuals and assign those individuals to a marketing subcommittee, they would be able to make decisions on marketing and whatnot that may not actually be in their wheelhouse of discussion. What we could do, to Mr. Esquaga's point, is provide a work group on this initial reconstruct of special events. And so really a 4-member board could be still established, and that committee could participate in a work group discussion, but then you could broaden the actual discussion and add more than just 3 members. You could add 15 members if you really wanted to, that would want to participate and workshop the foundation of how special events are approached in this. But I just want to make sure that we set the expectations that no more than 4 members could participate on this type of subcommittee. Ms. Safraza, do you have your hand up still? Do you have more comment? Jess?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I think, again, there's different models out there and how effective they are. I think the subcommittee, they work very effectively at the airport, where you have those working groups. And ultimately, I don't mind the private sector members being involved in that committee. I agree with you, the four members, it's still the majority of the public body. But ultimately, they're flushing out the recommendations, and it's coming to the whole board for an approval. It's only an advisory recommendation. And so I'm glad Mr. Murdoch brought up that's where I do see probably where we're lacking is that sports tourism, the arts, and our university, which is a gem. And I think if we stick to those 3 and we expand that board, as a board member, we have, they can be flushing through those applications. And also to Councilwoman Bivey's point about having, I do think that group can flush out how much of a percentage could go to the local events. And to Mr. Murdoch's point too, heads and beds is still really our primary mission. So I agree with what all the board members said. I just think that subcommittee is really the working group, and it's effective when those things come to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Franza. Any other discussion? So I'm going to try to take a stab at a potential motion, and we'll see where it goes and what the board approves. I would make a motion that we reinstall the marketing committee under the new name of the Marketing Special Events Funding Committee, with 4 representatives from the board of directors to sit on that committee, and potentially 3 public members, 1 representing the university, 1 representing the arts, and 1 representing both sports and business within the community, to make a 7-member subcommittee board to discuss issues pertaining to special events and marketing within the region. At this time, those members, the outside members, would not be either elected or current board members or directors. If they sat on a certain board, those would be more staff representative positions, i.e. like Ms. Tina Iftiger at the Airport Authority, or Mr. Sandoval, or the current AD at the university, somebody from the arts, whether that was Art Town, whether that was the museum, those types of discussions. That would be my recommendation to this board, and that would be a motion that I would make. if I can get a second on that, but I think that would be a functional board.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Ms. Bybee?
Just a quick question. So if we set up this subcommittee like our other subcommittees we have now, how does that work? Or with the current 7-member staff board you have, the panel that you have right now, how does that integrate? Does that go away? Does this replace it? Just I want to be clear kind of where do we go because I support this, but I'm curious when there's a panel already in place, how we work together.
I mean, my recommendation, I guess, would be that we still keep our internal panels, so we have our internal staff making decisions on what they think is best, and then taking those recommendations to the committee and have it as a working committee, not just a recommendation and approval process, but then there's already preliminary discussions, research that is being then pulled together and given some strategy and direction with the committee to have the right resources to have a discussion at that level. So we're not just starting from square one.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and I think
Yeah.
that would enhance, obviously, the committee not having to be experts in that area, and the resources that your staff could bring, I think would give us a really good process, and I would support that.
Thank you, Ms. Bybee. And so I think I think the intent was for staff and the internal panel to run down all of the inner workings in research and bring it to the overall panel for kind of governing guidance. Is realistically what the intent of the committee would be. All right, so I have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously with all members voting. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are on to item E3. This is the review, discussion, possible action regarding the extension of BVK, the RSCVA's integrated marketing agency. And before we kick this off, this is to Mr. Chapman's discussion earlier. These are if we were to ever change our marketing group, this is where these types of agreements or RFPs would come to for consideration prior to a full board ratification would come under the marketing committee going forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Currently, BVK is our agency of record. They've been doing a great job, and we really like what they're doing. They've been on board with us since 2017. We are seeing a short-term expiration of the current agreement, and so we've come to you to ask for a one-year extension of that agreement up to $340,000, which would include their base, which is $240,000, and then about $100,000 for contingency moving forward. The goal would be to, a year from now or 6 months from now, potentially work with this marketing committee to go through an RFP process. I think every agency should be held to an RFP process, whether we keep them or change them. I think it's healthy for all the types of things we do, but for now, they're doing great stuff, and we'd like to extend that for 1 year with the board's approval.
All right, I'd like to motion.
Mayor, I have a motion from Mayor Sheevy, second from Mr. Murdoch. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none. Oh, Mr. Chapman.
One question.
Mr. Chapman.
Just a question for Mr. Harris. Would it be helpful to have this go for, sorry, let me look at my notes here, to go through June 2023 to align with the fiscal year, or are you comfortable with just the year? It's always nice to align these contracts with fiscal years.
Mr. Chapman, it's a great question. It's something that Christina and I talked about at length around that. We could do either way. I think that from a budgeting standpoint, it's just fine to extend it for 15 months, which is what we talked about. But we will come back to this subcommittee and probably ask for consideration for an RFP in that next fiscal year. So whatever the board would like to do, we're fine with it.
So we currently have a motion to extend it for a year at this time, in a second. So I'm gonna call for the vote on the first and on that, and we'll see where that lands. So all those in favor?
Hey, Mr. Chair, the 15 months, I'm in favor of what Member Chapman is saying.
Well, let me go back to the first and second and see if they want to amend their motions. Mayor Sheevy, do you want to amend your motion at this time? Do you feel that's? All right, so we have an amendment to the motion to extend it for 15 months through the fiscal year. Mr. Murdoch, do you agree with that amendment? All right, I have an motion and an amended motion and amended second. Hey, I'm having a good morning. At least I'm not stumbling this morning. All right, we have a motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion on this item, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed. Motion carries unanimously with all members voting. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. That concludes all of our business items for today's special meeting. We are on to our final board member comments regarding items for future meetings. Mayor Sheevy, I have you signed in first.
Okay. First, I would like, and I don't know if we have to do a special meeting. I know a deck came in from Miss USA. I have no idea what their time frame is. So I'd like to either request a special meeting or request that we put it on an agenda to look at bringing back Miss USA. So that is one. I would also like a presentation on ASM retention bonuses. I received an email. I want to make sure that the board is aware of, and anyone that works with ASM, where that stands. And then the other one is, we talked about it, maybe the marketing committee could look at that, but it's, they used to do, and I brought this up last time, a campaign. It's called Bring Your Conference or Convention Home. And I think it would be a really great way for us to message to our locals that we would love to have their associations here and affiliations. So
Marvelous. We will get that on
That's
the
all I
agenda,
have.
Madam Mayor.
And I got to run. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Anything further? Ms. Keel.
Yeah, I would like to, and I don't know if this is the proper place to state it, but I would like to request that moving forward, that whenever the board is being asked to approve a decent sized sums of money, that, and this kind of goes back to what my comments in the retreat, that we are being given all the information to make educated decisions. Charles and I have had this conversation already, so it's not a surprise. But like, I know that I can go back to 2019 and look through the 50 pages of the budget, and then I can compare with the current one, but we're all really busy, and I am in support of things like Miss USA and others, but we need to understand what our financials are and what we're working with. So I'm being asked to approve, with the Conference of Mayors, $500,000 for special events, Miss USA, all these things sound great, but I feel like I'm kind of in the dark sometimes with where our financials are. Like, I know our revenues are up, but I know we've approved a lot of expenses. So what does that mean for the bottom line? And I apologize if I'm the only person that feels like I'm in the dark, but I just don't have a lot of time to go through all the budgets. And Courtney, I'd asked Courtney to do something for me once, was like a pie chart that broke out percentage of where we're spending our money, and it was like a one-pager, and it was like an aha moment, and she did such a great job. So I feel like I need something a little bit more easy to understand on where this organization is sitting at financially. Thank you.
And Ms. Keel, to your point, I did ask for the same thing you did just right now in our last meeting, which I know was you were the one that you couldn't hear, because I agree with you. A more comprehensive understanding of the budget and one-offs, because not only with fiscal years and budget approvals coming up, having one-offs or two-offs with Ms. Yeager, pre-budget meetings to discuss, and then ongoing quarterly understandings of where our expenditures and spends are, so that the board members have that institutional knowledge of what we are spending our money on and where that's going and what those incomes are. And we used to, in every board packet prior to, we used to have a score sheet from that on strategy, and we had kind of our score sheet where we were for room nights years prior and whatnot. Maybe we reinstitute that, but really kind of bring that back into a smaller, more condensed form that's very, as you pointed out, very easy to read and collect in a very timely manner. So I would agree with that.
The score sheet, I remember the score sheet, that had a lot of really good statistics and revenue numbers and whatnot, but it didn't, from what I remember, it didn't outline the expense parts of it, right?
It didn't, and
Okay.
what I would recommend is that we include the expenses into that. So every month we have an ongoing tally of where we are, kind of an ongoing monthly or bi-monthly understanding from Ms. Yeager and the budget and the finance team about where our expenditures are, what our revenues look like, along with our revenues that are coming in.
Mr. Chair, if I can just to weigh in for a minute, we do have a quarterly meeting with our finance committee to go over all that, which Ms. Jager heads up. But what we will do is we'll add to the monthlies in terms of an overview when it comes to the finance. Ms. Silver.
Yes, thank you. I just want to, I guess, compliment Mr. Murdoch on what he said, which is a really important reminder of our purpose here, which is room nights. I think we've had a productive conversation about special events, which I understand are outside the purview of our necessary duties. But to Ms. Keel's point, we have a fiduciary responsibility as a board to oversee the budget, and that doesn't just include what we're bringing in room nights, but what we're expensing and what it costs to get involved in all these adjacent issues. So I appreciate both of your comments, because I think we have to be reminded of why we're here. And I'm not here about the Aces Stadium, I'm not here about Art Town. I mean, all those things are great, and they are all about our community and Pumpkin Palooza and everything that we could possibly think of. But I know, as head of the Chamber of Commerce, there are hundreds of events, hundreds of nonprofits, hundreds of entities that want to do things. So I'm pleased that today's meeting is ending with a reminder that we're about room tax revenue and our budget. So thank you both.
Thank you, Ms. Silver. Ms. Bybee.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. So in moving forward for our new Marketing and Special Events Committee, I know those are appointed by you, Mr. Chair. Will you be taking people, volunteers who are interested? Can they just contact you?
Yes.
Okay,
Contact me directly,
thank you.
So I just have one follow-up question.
or I'll place you without even asking you.
So I just want to ask, so with the Miss USA proposal or deck that was sent over, like, and then my comments about the financials, so are we going to get an opportunity to review that and how that fits within our budget and what the region can get from it? What would be the next steps on something like this?
Well, what I've asked in conference with Mr. Harris is that to have staff vet the proposal, and because it is quite a substantial ask, vet the proposal based upon its last attendance and what they're asking for now, what those negotiations would be like, and see if the staff could bring that back in the May 19th meeting for a discussion with some of the other, to make sure that we try to hit their timelines, because I too do not know what their timelines are. It was not in their deck that I took a look at. So to know that timing and kind of those issues, I believe that will come back for us at the May 19th meeting.
Yeah, and I don't know their timeline either. I remember last time they came to us very last minute, and with a large amount of money, that doesn't sit well with me. However, with that being said, and I am in support of the events, if for some reason we can't meet their timeline by the May 19th, would we call a special meeting? Not that I want another meeting, but
Yes, we would.
Okay.
Yes, we would.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Murdoch.
On that alone, it'd be nice to know the performance, because I know they touched a lot of different properties. I know downtown got a piece of it. I know you got a piece. It'd be nice to know what the performance was back in 19, was it? So when we do present, we know what how many hits we got on the internet, how much Reno got. It'd be nice to know all that facts.
And I remember Harris did take on. Harris had played a major role in that, and did put up a significant amount of money prior to their acquisition into the Caesars Group. And so, but now with Harris not being in that does change the dynamic, because a lot of the staff prior to stayed at Harris, where the event was held at GSR. So I know there was kind of that spread around. And so we would have to go and look, and now based upon the new landscape of our community, who could participate at what levels, because there is a varying number of levels, from the participants to the visitors to the actual staff and filming crew that they're asking for. So there is a number of varying. So we're going to need staff to come back and give us a more broad understanding of really what the ask is in the timeline.
And I agree that there is some negotiations on the site fee, because it is last minute by their group. So like, I think Shannon, we both agree that you might be able to pick it up at a different price than you did back in 19, because it's time to negotiate.
Time to negotiate. Mr. Desquaga.
Yeah, I just think this is an example, though, of exactly, I'm not comfortable as a board member, quite honestly, whether it's TEDx, and I think TEDx is a wonderful event, or this coming directly to, I think it should be vetted. This is exactly why we're saying we're creating this structure to do a vetting, to come back. I think we have to run all the traps on that and present to the board. I'm gonna jump back to TEDx, but I think they're wonderful. I think it's money well spent. We have discretionary funds. We said, it's in the minutes last meeting of saying, we have something to catch events that miss the deadline, go through the process, versus coming in request, putting board members on the spot. I think there's a process, and I think this is exactly in that, I don't know what the ask is. Last time it was a lot of money. And you're right, what I don't understand, and again, I don't want to get in the weeds of this specific event, but why are we this close out again? I mean, this happened last time we were up against the time frame. We got to have an answer. We're back. This is deja vu. And I'm totally open, but I think, again, I'm looking forward to getting this framework in place so we can run it that way.
We'll take that under consideration. Thank you. Mr. Chapman, any further comments from you or Ms. Ferrazza? All right. No. Go ahead.
Try to make this meeting a little longer. On the new committee, I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So it's a 4-member committee. We're a small board, and so we have issues if we create too many committees. And I know several people have expressed interest in being on that committee. I'll sit down with the chair. We have to be conscious of making sure that no one committee constitutes a quorum of another committee. So if you sit on committees, it may be difficult to get you on other committees, and so we'll take the interest and sit down and do the math. But if somebody that wants to be on a committee ends up not, that's the issue we're dealing with. I just want to make sure everybody understands that.
So probably what I'll say in consultation with Mr. Harris and Mr. Kennedy is what I will send around is the current standing of the two finance and executive committees, with the addition, and see applications-wise, prioritize who would like to sit on what. Maybe you won't want to sit on anything, or maybe you would like to sit on more. So we'll see what we can do, and I'll send that email around with staff to all the board members for consideration. And then also what we'll I'll have Ms. Ernie reach out to members within the university and those other entities and see if there is interest in participation from that level. All
Mr.
right.
Chair, real quick,
Yes.
for Mr. Kennedy, so on the 3 committees, this will be our 3rd subcommittee. Should each of us only serve on one, or can you serve on 2 of the 3? Tell us legally where we stand.
So you can serve on more than one committee, but we really need to just sit down and map it out and make sure that we don't have a quorum of one committee on another committee, because then we have quorum issues.
We had 4 when we first started. We had so many committees. It was really funny. But we had also 13 members, so it was different. All right. Seeing no further comments, I think all the comments have been great today. We will bring those items back, the immediate items back for consideration in the 19th board meeting. Is there any further public comment? Seeing no public comment?
No public comment.
Unless staff wants to jump up and say something super fun right now. All right, no. All right, ladies and gentlemen, have a great Friday. Enjoy your weekends. We are adjourned. Just about 2 hours. That's not bad. Not in comparison to some